So from today we are going to start with Nexus, and these are the various topics that we are going to cover. We'll understand what are build artifacts, what exactly is an artifact, what is repository manager, Nexus introduction, installation, and Nexus alternatives. Okay, so why we use Nexus and what are the various repository types supported by Nexus, and then we'll understand how to use Nexus to store your Docker images and to store your Maven artifacts and also your Helm charts. Okay, and then we do some basic Nexus administration like adding users, roles, and privileges. And most importantly, we'll talk about integrations like integrations with Maven and also integrations with Jenkins by using various Nexus plugins. Okay, so we're going to talk about two different plugins in Nexus. One is uh, directly Nexus plugin for Jenkins, and the other one is ConfigFile provider plugin. Okay, so we'll see everything in detail. Okay, so it will take a lot of time. Okay, so please be patient as well. Okay, so what exactly is Sonatype Nexus and why we use Nexus, right? So Nexus is from Sonatype, and Sonatype has a lot of other products as well. And Nexus repository is one such product. We have Nexus lifecycle repository, container, firewall. Okay, so there are a lot of tools by Sonatype, and repositories is one of them, right? And Nexus, platform. Okay, or Nexus repository can integrate with all these tools. Okay, you can integrate with your Docker, GitHub, GitLab. Okay, and you can also integrate with any of your favorite IDs like VS Code, JetBrains. Okay, so you can integrate with any of these available tools and various platforms. Okay, so we are saying Nexus artifact store we are using to store all our artifacts, right? But what exactly is an artifact? Anyone?
To
So what
package
is an
form of our
artifact?
application, like war file or jar file.
Hmm.
The
Okay.
outcome of build result.
Yeah. So it is an outcome of your build result, or it can be an outcome of any process, and that outcome will be used as an input for the other processes. Okay. So that's a build artifact, like your jar file. Okay, so you may run your jar file directly, or you may run your war file directly, or you can put it in your tomcat. Okay, or else you can containerize your war file, so your war file becomes the artifact. So not only this, your Docker image is also an artifact, right? Your reports, logs, zip files, star files, ISO files, img files, everything comes under the artifact. Okay, and how do we use Nexus in our CI/CD pipelines, right? So we have Jenkins at the middle. So Jenkins can run the build job, right? So it can clone the source code from Git repository. So when it triggers this job, it is configurable, right? So we can ask it to pull the source code at regular intervals through build periodically way, or we can also use webhooks. Okay. Now once Jenkins builds and generates the artifact, the first thing we need to do is we need to push that artifact to any of the repository stores. Okay, so if it is a generic artifact restore like Nexus or JFrog, it supports all the artifacts including Docker images. But if your artifacts are only Docker images and you're not into using any of the artifacts, then instead of setting up Nexus, you can set up any of the container repositories, right? Harbor is one repository. Okay, it will store only Docker images. Or else if you directly want to store in Docker Hub, you can directly push it to the Docker Hub. But any generic artifacts like war files, R files, star files, ISO, IMG, so you should definitely go for Nexus or either JFrog repository. Okay, then only you should go to the other stages like continuous deployment and continuous delivery. Understood, guys? Right? Let's see the Nexus website first. So it is from a software company known as Sonatype. Okay, so they have a lot of products. So we'll be using Nexus repository, and Nexus repository also has two different versions. So we'll talk about them. Okay, so manage packages across your some complete software supply chain. Okay, so you can store any of these artifacts related to any of these programming languages, including your Linux packages, RPM packages, etc. Okay, it will store all these. So here apt get is also supported. That means you can store Linux packages, right? So distribute packages and containerized apps like Docker, Helm, Yum, and apt. And coming to the pricing, so there are two versions. One is the Nexus OSS and the other one is Pro. Okay, so Nexus OSS, and there is a Pro version. I think Pro version, you need to pay for, but Nexus OSS is completely free. Okay, with limited set of options. So you can also compare Nexus OSS with Nexus Pro. Okay, we'll see what are the various things that are not supported. Okay, so staging and build promotion. So I'll talk about what exactly is this promotion keyword, and why we use them. Okay, so Nexus Pro supports this promotion single sign-ons, or you can integrate OSS with, I mean, Pro version with LDAP. Okay, so LDAP cannot be used with open source. Okay, so advanced repository health check and replication, Docker groups. So these, there are certain things that are not supported in your OSS, but Pro version you'll get everything. Okay, and so I'll explain about this diagram also in the presentation. Okay, so that is about difference. Okay, so this is Nexus OS. The latest version is 3.x. Latest is 3, and it will manage all these formats: Docker format, Yum, APT, Maven. So these are the various things that we use. So we also use Helm. Okay, so in this Nexus series, we are going to talk about Docker, Maven, and Helm. We'll see how to store all these artifacts in your Nexus. Okay, so what is a repository? So we already talked about a repository, right? So it's a place where we store all our language dependent libraries, binaries, etc. Okay, including container images like Docker registry. So registry means it will have more than one repository, correct? So why we use repositories in the first place? Like Docker repository, I mean Docker registry, Nexus repository, because it makes it easy to access those packages, right? So you can create user accounts, so you can limit who can access those packages, who can upload packages, who can download packages, right? So we cannot put all our packages into public repositories. So we should also store some packages privately. That's why we'll set up our own repositories like Nexus or JFrog. Okay. So you take any of the repositories, they support almost all the repository types internally, like Maven Central Repository. Okay. Ruby, npm, Docker. Okay. So all these are supported by all these artifact restores like Nexus or JFrog. Okay, so if you take this JFrog artifactory comparison, the JFrog also has a lot of various softwares like JFrog X-ray for scanning the images, JFrog artifactory just like our Nexus repository. Okay, so this JFrog artifactory also will store all these repositories: Maven, Helm, Docker, NBM, Python, etc. Okay, and also it has some other products like binary, bin tray and mission control. Okay, so there are other things as well, but we do not concentrate on them. So JFrog Artifactory is similar to Nexus repository. Okay, clear guys? So all these are called repository managers. Like JFrog repository is a repository manager. Nexus repository is also repository manager. Okay, so why we use repository manager? Okay, so if you use repository manager, okay, so it's easy to see the artifacts, configure users, add permissions, add roles, right? So without repository manager, it is always always the CLI operations. Okay, so we can't rely on CLI all the time, right? So you have a UI, so that is called as repository manager. Okay, clear guys?
Yes.
So Nexus is an open source repository, so anyone can download, anyone can modify the source code, and it serves as a single source of truth. That means if so once you build the artifact, right, so you should definitely version control it in the Nexus repository. Okay, that's why it is called single source of truth, because it acts like a central store for all your artifacts, like your war files, container images. So if someone asks you what exactly is the artifact that is used for this build, or the sorry, for this release, so you can show them which artifact you are using. Okay, and no one can actually go and change anything in the Nexus once it is uploaded. So either you can replace it, or else you can delete it, but those are the various permissions we give only for the admin users. For rest of the users, they can only view the artifacts. Okay, so I'll also show you how to control such behavior. And Nexus can also organize all your artifacts, like it will organize all the containers in one repository, war files into one repository. Okay, all snapshot dependencies in one, all release dependencies into one. So it organizes everything so that access becomes easier for you. Okay, and as we already said, so Nexus will support all of these artifacts. Okay, yeah, so now how Nexus repository manager actually works, right? Okay, so Nexus supports basically two types of repositories, so I'll come to them later. So this is a central Nexus repository that you have set up. Okay, and here is your CI server, so I'm calling it as Jenkins. So usually Jenkins pulls your source code from any of your, which one guys, SCM tools, right?
Yes.
Understood. So SCM, it takes the source code, it builds it, and let's assume it generated the artifact. Okay, so before generating artifact, let's assume so it needed a dependency or library. Then what it will do? So basically it will, what it will do is, hmm, it will go out, right? It will first check the repository, Nexus repository internally. If it is not there, what it has to do? So it has to fetch from outside, right? From third party repositories. Okay, let's assume I need a YAML dependency. So first it will check internally Nexus. If it is not there, Nexus itself will forward the request to outside internet. Okay, through a proxy repository. So we'll talk about proxy repository again. Then once it receives the response from proxy repository, so it's caches that response locally, so that next time it can serve it. Okay, so now that dependency came to your Jenkins server, now Jenkins server can build the final artifact. So now the final artifact will be stored in the staging repository. Okay, so what is a staging repository is, it is like pre-prod repository. Okay, so if I generate a container image called test colon 1.0, okay, so without properly testing this test 1.0, I cannot send it to production. So that's why there will be two types of Docker repositories that we use. Okay, so one repository stores all the staging or pre-prod related images, one stores all the production related Docker images. Only the images that are there in this production repository should go into your production. Okay. There here we hear a term called promotion. Okay. So promotion is taking an artifact from pre-prod environment and making it available into production environment. So of course it is like a simple copy of the artifact from this repository to this repository, but for copying itself it needs a lot of tests to be executed, and there will be approvals needed. Okay, let's assume Python 1.0 is the Docker containers image I have in the staging repository. Now, in order to make it to available in the production, I need to promote it to production repository. Okay, so that is called promotion. Clear? So directly will not push anything to the production. So there will be two different repositories, or maybe two different repository managers themselves. Maybe it will have two different Nexus repositories also. Depends. Okay. So Nexus OSS and
Vikram,
Row we already
sorry,
compared.
sorry, Vikram. One second. Can you go back previous slide, please? Here two types is there, right? One is for the from the CID build, and the other one is a proxy repo cache public. Can you?
Hmm.
What is
Yeah,
that?
I'll come to it. No, I'll
Oh, I'm
come to
sorry.
it.
Sorry, sorry. Thank you, thank you.
So we already compared. The latest version is 3.37.3. So we'll see when we install it. And Jenkins runs on 8080 by default. So Nexus it is set at 8081. Okay, so it is also configurable. Okay, but since some may run Jenkins and also Nexus in one machine, so in order to avoid port collision, so this is marked as 8081 by default. Okay, and Nexus you can run it as a system service controlled through systemctl. Okay, and also you can run it as a Docker container, which we had seen in the Docker sessions. You can run it also as a Kubernetes pod deployed through Helm charts. Okay, so Helm charts are the most preferred way of deploying the apps. So you can deploy it through the Helm charts as well. Okay, so what are the various features is we have the repository management. Okay, and the repository replication and access control. That means you can create users and roles and have authentication, so which means your Nexus can store the data of the users, or else you can integrate with your LDAP or integrate with single sign-on. Okay, okay, understood, guys. Okay, now let's talk about hosted versus proxy versus group repositories. So I already covered these in our previous sessions, but let's cover in detail about what are these proxy repositories, because we are going to use them in the demos. Okay, so what are proxy repositories? What is a proxy repository, guys? Hmm? What is a proxy repository? Don't know. So let's say I'm in my home network. Okay, so I'm practicing my Docker skills. So I wanted to pull a Docker image. So the Docker image is Ubuntu latest image, correct? So what I'll do, I'll pull from where? Docker Hub, right? Correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
simply do Docker pull Ubuntu. It will go to the internet and then it will fetch that image for you, because so I'm using home network. So all inbound and outbound connections are open for me. Okay, so there are no firewalls in between. But what will happen if you are in a corporate network? Okay, in a private VPC. Okay, so you have various systems. It can be user system. Okay, or it can be some Jenkins server. Okay, so any such machines under your private network. Okay, private VPC. So what will happen in this case? Hmm? Tell me. Yes. So I'm in a private VPC. Let me write properly. So will you be able to talk to internet, public internet, if you are in your office network? No, right? It's not possible
No.
No.
because everything is completely blocked. Even in some organizations, GitHub itself is completely blocked, right? So I have, let's say, I have machine, and I also have some Jenkins or some CI servers. Okay, so even they have to, during the build process, have to pull some external container images or repositories. Okay, so outside in the internet we have various repositories. So we have Docker registry to host all your public container images. Okay, so we have Maven Central. Okay, and then we have artifact hub.io. Okay, to store all our Helm charts. Even have npm to store all our npm dependencies. So these are all publicly available. Okay, but in my machine, okay, so I don't have direct internet connection to pull any of these dependencies. Okay, so it is completely blocked. So what we do in this case is, so organizations usually provide the proxy server. Okay, so they'll give you some proxy server details. So that is one option. Okay, so proxy server, it is a proxy server basically, which allows the internet connection to outside world. Okay, so now they'll ask you to configure your machine to the proxy server. Okay, and even Docker supports proxy server details. Okay, so let's say if you want to use Docker pull, so I can also give the proxy server details, so that this pull request, okay, I mean Docker pull request will first go to the proxy, and then it will try to fetch the information from there. Okay, even Maven will also have some proxy related settings. Okay, but what if I don't have such proxy related settings for each tool, right? What if my client tool doesn't support any proxy related information? Then this proxy server will not allow, I mean will not support, I mean is of no use. Okay, basically this proxy will take your request, it will go out and then fetch that response for you. And one more thing here is, these proxy servers should also whitelist that particular URL. Okay, so let's say my Docker pull usually goes to docker.io site. Then this docker.io site should be whitelisted at the proxy site, so that it will allow that response, I mean request outside. That is that is another thing. Okay, so proxy server is only used for only for limited tasks. But instead what I will do is, so I'll set up a repository. Okay, so inside the repository I can have two different types of storages. Okay, so one storage I'll call it as hosted, where people will use this to host their own artifacts. Okay, so they can push their war files, container images. Okay, it is like a private repository, only accessible so within this environment. Okay, so you generate any artifact and you push it to host it, because you are hosting internally within your organization. Okay, only the members of your organization with proper access, they can access them, not anyone from outside. Okay, in fact the URLs also, the private URLs. Okay, so they will be only resolved within your company's own VPC, or by using your VPNs. Okay, let's assume like that. Okay, so this is hosted. Let's assume there is this dev one, okay, who generated some artifact called JSON. Okay, he generated a JSON library, so he's hosting it so that other project members or other projects can consume it. So what if another developer needs an YAML dependency which is not there in the hosted, right? Excuse me, understood guys? So that dependency is not there. That dependency is with the Maven Central. Okay. Then how do I get that dependency? Here, what we'll do is we'll create one more repository type called proxy repository. This proxy repository is only for Maven Central. That means this internal proxy repository is just a proxy to Maven Central. If you want to create one more proxy for Docker registry, you create one more proxy repository. Okay, that is another thing. Okay, what is the advantage of this proxy? Now, if dev2 wants YAML dependency, which is not there in the hosted section, so what he will do, he will try to reach the proxy server for that information. Now, proxy server, it internally checks whether it is there or not. Then it will to connect itself to the remote repository. Okay, so proxy, remote, everything is almost same. Okay, so whatever URL that you give, okay, when you create the proxy, it will connect to that URL, and then it will try to fetch that dependency for you, and then it will serve that other user. And also what it will do, it will store it in its cache, so that if dev1 requests for the YAML dependency, okay, first it will be searched in all these repositories, so internally it will be there. Okay, but here the problem is, so if dev1 wants to store something, he has to talk to the hosted repository URL. But if he wants to check for dependencies, he has to check in hosted to see whether someone already have it, or else he has to check the proxy. That means he should try two different URLs, right? Understood? Clear? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so why to have two different URLs? Okay, so that's why we have something known as group repository. Okay, so what is the advantage of having this group repositories? Group repository will have only one URL in that group. Okay, inside the group you can put any number of repositories like hosted, and then proxy. Okay, if you have two proxies related to same Docker Hub, or two hosted repositories. Okay, and when I'm saying about group, so all these group repositories should be of same type. Okay, if I'm creating a group repository for all the container images, this hosted part should also host the container images. This proxy should also be related to the container images only. Okay, now what is the advantage? Okay, let's say there is this user. Okay, so now he wants a library known as time. Okay, so he'll use this group repository URL only. Okay, now this, once the request reaches group repository URL, the request will be the request will be, you know um, whatever he is requesting, right, the particular user. So that will be checked across all these available repositories. First it will be checked in the hosted repository whether time is there or not. If time is not there, it will go to the proxy repository. Then it will go out to the internet, it will fetch the time dependency, and then it will locally cache it in the proxy repository. Okay, so now this particular user gets the time dependency. What if some other user needs this time dependency? Okay, so there are two ways. Okay, using group is the easiest way, because if I talk to group, so group will automatically check in all its repositories and then it will give the result. Or if I have to be very specific, then I have to either talk to hosted or talk to proxy. Okay, talking to individual is always difficult. That's why we create a group. Okay, let's say why group is needed. So there is this team. Okay, let's say a team called IoT. So they're generating their own Docker images, but they created their own hosted repository for them, hosted repository for the container images. So IoT team is storing all its hosted. Okay, so there is another team, AI team. They also created their own hosted repository to store all their container images. Similarly, there is a third team. Okay, like DevOps team. So they have their own set of images, common images like Nginx, HA proxy. They are storing in their own hosted. Okay, but there is a CI system. Okay, a central Jenkins server. Okay, now the central CI system has to take those Docker images. Okay, correct? So will I ask this Jenkins to talk to individual URLs like this? So it will be like burden, right? In case if some other hosted repository is created, I should let Jenkins know even to check in that. Instead, I'll combine all the similar repository types into a group. Okay. So now a group gets a URL. So I'll just use that URL. So if I request for an image called Python 1.0 to this group URL, so it will be checked in all the repositories inside that group. So I don't have to worry about, going to a single URL and fetching that in image. I'll simply use the group, and group will respond me with the response. That's it. I don't have to care in which hosted repository that particular image is available. Understood, guys? Okay. So that is basically a proxy repository. So we'll create a proxy repository so that the developers through proxy repositories, so they can go to the central repositories. Okay. So once a central repository sends the response back, so usually that response is cached internally to your repository so that that same responses can be used for subsequent calls to that same library. Understood, guys? So what is hosted repository? So hosted repository is one which you host. Okay, let's assume you generated a library which you don't want to put it in Maven Central or any public repositories. Okay, so you wanted to host it internally due to security concerns. So you created hosted repository. Okay, and then you store all your artifacts there. And this hosted repository is only accessible within your private organization. So if it is hosted internally, okay, of course, if you open publicly, I mean, if you put this hosted repository or Nexus repository publicly and allow anonymous access, so anyone can pull it. Okay, that is also there. So by default, Maven has two different types of hosted repository. So not every hosted repository has support for multiple types. Only Maven has, because Maven has two types of dependencies. One is the snapshot dependency and the other one is the release dependency. Okay, so you can host all your snapshot dependencies in Maven snapshot repository. For all the releases, you can create one more hosted repository.
Vikram, what is that snapshot dependencies?
So you gone through our Maven sessions?
No,
Yeah, so it's explained there, but yeah, I'll try
no
to
worries.
explain
I'll go through
quickly.
it. No issue.
Sorry.
I'll go through the session. Leave it.
It's okay, no problem. So let's say that you generated a war file. Okay, so this war file is a war or jar file. So this is not a uh, final artifact. Okay, clear? A Maven artifact will have a group ID,
Yeah.
artifact ID, and version. So group ID like com.devopsmedez.com, and artifact ID is your actual name of the jar file that you wanted to give. I wanted to give the name of the artifact as time library. So it's just simply time. And version, I wanted to put it as 1.0. Let's assume. Okay. So my artifact name becomes time, colon 1.0. Okay. Understood? So this is
Yeah.
the, name. But I should also append with my group ID so that my particular artifact will get the a complete unique name across the internet. Okay, but what is this version 1.0? So 1.0, 2.0, 2.1, so these are all the release artifacts. Okay, so these are the version numbers that usually we use it for the releasing. Okay, so that means if I use 1.0, if I generate any artifact with 1.0 and if I push it to the publicly available repository, then this becomes the release one. That means I cannot push one more artifact with 1.0. So even if it is having lot of bugs, I can't do anything. So next artifact should be 1.1 only. Okay, so those are called releases. Okay, but in case of snapshots are the dependencies which are not finalized yet. Okay, not finalized. So that means I will generate the same artifact with 1.0 version thousands of times until I fix it. Okay, but here I'll use a special keyword in the version tag that is called version number hyphen snapshot. Okay,
Oh yeah, got it now.
so now if I use this string snapshot and whenever I push this to a central repository like Nexus or JFrog, so these artifacts are version controlled in a separate way. Of course, they are all available in 1.0 only version, but internally, this snapshot keyword will be expanded as current timestamp. Okay, so as of today, so this will be expanded as 2022. So it's August, right? 08, and it's a time 07:47, followed by the seconds value like this. Okay, so a folder with the current timestamp will be automatically created. Next time, if I generate an artifact with the same name, okay, it will be stored with that particular timestamp. Okay, clear?
Yeah. So even
But
can we
release
use
artifacts are
these
not like that.
snapshots in the production also
Yeah. So
with
in the
annotation?
production also you can yes you can use, but you need to call it with own 1.0 only. So you cannot use this snapshot as the keyword. Okay. So you will pull it from the snapshot dependency, snapshot repository. But so snapshot dependencies are handled in a different way. So if I'm using Maven internally, Maven locally, so once if I download YAML 1.0 dependency from central, basically, right? So
Yes.
it will be cached in my local machine. Correct.
Yes.
It will be cached in my local machine. Next time it won't go. But if I try to download the snapshot dependency, okay, of 1.0, every time it will go to the internet and it will check the latest one, whether latest one is there or not. That means 1.0 snapshot is not the finalized one, because every time someone will try to push it to the same repository at the same time. That means there is no guarantee that whatever snapshot dependency that you have locally is the latest one, because latest one is not with the, because 1.0 is not the latest one. Okay, is not always the latest because it is snapshot. That means someone will always push it to the same repository at the same time. So your client will always try to download the snapshot dependency. Okay, so this is how our hosted works. So if the artifact is not found here, so through company proxy it will go out, and then it will fetch the artifact, and then it will also cache it locally. That means if someone requests for that dependency directly from your local, it will be served. Okay, so this is not through any repository. If you see, I have a proxy network and I have an npm utility configured with the proxy, so that the npm local, if it is not there, it is through company proxy reaching the public npm repository, and then it is getting that information back. Okay, but group or virtual repository, so in Nexus we call it as a group, in JFrog we call it as a virtual. Okay, both are same. Basically, a group repository is a collection of multiple repositories, okay, of the same format combined into single virtual group. Okay, of same format. Okay, you cannot club Maven, Helm, Docker repository into a group repository. You can't do that. So they should be of same format. Okay, see here what I did. For all the Nexus, for all the Maven releases, I created a repository. For all the Maven snapshot, I created a repository. So what are these repositories? What is the type of these repositories?
Maven repository.
What is the type? Hosted, right? Because you created them for your internal usage. one you created to store all your release artifacts, one you created all to store your snapshot artifacts. The third one is proxy. That means within the your Nexus, if that particular artifact is not found, so the request will be forwarded to the outside internet through proxy, right? Understood. So that's why I created one more proxy. So I'll tell you, so don't worry. But all these will get a different URL, right? So how will I ask my user take the snapshots from this particular URL? Or if you need releases, you take from here. If you don't have your artifacts in your Nexus, fetch one from the proxy so that it will go out and fetch the dependency from outside internet. I can't ask my users like this, right? Instead, I'll group them together and I'll provide them a single URL, and I'll ask them to use this URL for all their Maven artifact needs. Okay, so for fetching the internal available repositories or to get the outside repositories, so they'll use the same URL. Nexus is smart enough to know what artifact you are requesting, whether it is there or not. Let's assume you are requesting for 1.0 hyphen snapshot, and the request you are forwarding it to this URL. The Nexus is smart enough, so it will check the snapshot in the name, then it will always go to check the snapshot. If snapshot is not there, then it will first check the Maven releases. This is hosted repository. So inside the hosted repository, if it is there, it will serve the user. Otherwise, it will think that it needs to pull the artifact from public internet. So through a proxy repository, it will go out and then fetch the dependency and give that to you. Okay, clear? So this is a screenshot taken from Nexus itself. So if you try to create a new repository, so you will be shown all the available repository types supported by Nexus. So these are all the repository types. Of course, you can add any new repository type also. Like in market, any new tool came, so Nexus will start to support that also through various plugins or extensions. Okay, so here I have an option to create Maven proxy, Maven hosted, and if I have multiple hosted and proxies, and if I wanted to combine them together, I can also choose Maven to group repository. Okay, so usually group, apart from clubbing together, group itself will not do anything at all. Okay, it makes it easy to access our repositories, individual repositories. Okay, and in our day-to-day activities, we also come across this keyword called replication. So what is this repository replication, right? And how many types of repository replications are there? So for this I will take the reference of this particular link. Any idea what is a replication? What exactly is a replication?
It's manage the life cycle, I think.
I think
No,
it's just
Managing the
kind
life
of
cycle.
mirroring.
life cycle is different.
Copy of the other
It is kind of
repository.
mirroring.
Yeah, so it's like a mirroring. So within your internal within your organization, right, so there can be multiple Nexus repositories. So one will be in one availability zone, so other will be in another availability zone, or maybe in different environments you'll have different Nexus. Okay, so here I have a Nexus repository set up in three different locations. Okay, so let me show in the presentation. Okay, so here I have Nexus repository set up in three different locations. So one is this location, and there are two different locations here. Okay, so people in that region will try to use this repository. People in one other region, they'll try to use this repository, and other reasons they'll try to use this repository. But I wanted to mirror some of the repositories. Let's say there is a Docker repository created and being consumed in this one, in this repository. Similarly, I have a Docker repository here, but I want these two repositories available in some other uh, you know Nexus repository which is set up in some other location. Then what I can do is I can try to replicate or mirror those repositories from those locations. Okay, so this is called replication. So internally, this replication algorithm will be handled by the replicator. Okay, so we don't have to do anything. So we just have to configure a repository and ask it to replicate from a remote URL. Okay, so for this Nexus, so there will be a different URL. Okay, so similarly there will be a different URL for this. Then in this repository, I can configure those URLs and ask my Nexus repository to try to replicate from there. And also if someone tried to upload any new artifact in that particular repository, automatically that will be synced, okay, to this repository as well. So what is that sync frequency? That means I can also set up the cron job in this repository. So during that job it will try to sync the artifacts. Okay, so every time someone uploads any new artifacts, so they'll get synced here also. Okay. So this is like replicating from one source to multiple targets. That means here there is one source repository. So I've shown in an opposite way. Actually this is my source. Okay, people will try to upload here, but from a single source there are multiple target repositories. Okay, let's say this is something like a dev. Maybe this is a test environment, or this is a QA environment, something like that. So from dev, so your test and QA environments will try to replicate. Okay, and also you will have bidirectional replication. Okay, bidirectional replication in the sense, let's say there are two repositories in two different locations. Okay, so if I upload something here, it gets replicated here. If I upload something here, it gets replicated here. So this is bidirectional. In monodirectional, in this one, so there won't be any bidirectional. So that means if I upload something here, it gets reflected here. But if I upload anything here, it won't come here. Okay, it's not like that. So there can be two way. Depending upon the use case, you will create the bidirectional or unidirectional artifacts replication. So replication doesn't care about the type of artifact. You replicate your container images, war files, R files, IMG files, anything. Okay. But also remember, these replications are supported only in the pro versions, not the free versions. Right? Understood is clear? Now let's understand the basic security concepts in Nexus. Okay, so Nexus works on RBAC, which is role-based authentication. Okay, so you will have to create different users to access Nexus, and also you can enable anonymous access where people can access the repository contents, but they cannot modify, delete, edit, upload anything. Okay, so anonymous users also will only get the read access. Okay, so there are two types of users. One is the regular user and the other one is the anonymous user. And your complete Nexus, not only Nexus, even if you take JFrog Artifactory or even Jenkins, so they support role based authentication strategy. Okay, let's see what is the difference between a user, what is a role, and what is a privilege. Okay, so do anyone knows about any of this? Okay, so here these are all chained together. First, at the high level you have a user, and then you have a role, and the the least of all these is privileges. Okay, so what is the use of all these roles, users, and privileges? Okay, so we already talked about this in Jenkins, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so here the chain is like this: user, role, and privilege. Okay, so let's understand. Okay, so what is easier, whether creating a user and giving it permissions, individual permissions is easier? Okay, let's assume I created a user and assigned permissions to him. Again, I created a different user and assigned permissions to him. So I'm directly creating users and assigning permissions to them. Okay, so this is the correct way? No, this is not the correct way, because for each user I'm managing the permissions individually. Okay, so let's assume, okay, I have a user one, so who has access to a repository for only read and write. Okay, for a Docker registry. for a Docker repository. There is a second user who needs write access, sorry, or only read access to this Docker. Okay, there is this third user who needs read, write, and delete access to a Maven repository. Let's assume. Okay, now there is this fourth user who needs read access to Docker and read write access to Maven repository. Okay, so I'm managing the users and these permissions like this. Okay, so what if I have to, okay, revoke Maven repository access to all the users for time being? So I should go to individual users, then I have to remove these permissions, right? So what if I have 1,000 users?
Lot of work.
Sorry. So it becomes difficult, right, to find and delete all the permissions of individual users. So that's why we created a role. Okay, so we create a role. So we create roles such as developer role, okay, tester role, deployer role. Okay, these are the various roles. Okay, each role will have certain privileges. Okay, so what are these privileges? Okay, so privileges can be controlled individually also. Okay, so I'm controlling them individually. So I'll write list of privileges that I create. I'll create a privilege p1. Okay, that will give read, write, delete access to a Docker repository. Okay, I'll create a privilege 2. Okay, with read access to only Maven. Similarly, I'll create different privileges. Then for each role, I'll select a proper privilege. Okay, since he is a developer, he needs only write access to Docker. So let's say P3 assumes write access to Docker. Then I'll give only P3 to him. So he is a tester. So he needs both read and, let's assume, read access to multiple repositories. Okay, so here P3 indicates read to Maven. Similarly, P5 indicates read access to Docker repository. So I'll assign P2 comma P5 for him. Okay, and deployer, so he needs only write access. Maybe I'll assign P10 to him. Okay, so I'm individually creating the privileges and assigning them to various roles: developer, tester, and deployer. Clear? Now here comes the user at the beginning. So there is this user 1. So user 1, he is a developer and he needs developer related all permissions. Then what I'll do, I'll assign the developer role to him. Then once I assign developer role, all the privileges that I assign to the developer role will be assigned to this user 1. Similarly, there is user 2. He is also similarly he is also a developer. Then I'll give the dev role to him. So I'm not managing the permissions individually, so I'm managing in the form of role. Now there is this user 3 who is recently added. He is from testing team. Then I will give the tester role to him. In future, tester roles are to be modified, right? Maybe I have to add some rules, some more privileges to them, or revoke the pre-existing one. Similarly, I'll come to the privileges. Okay, so if new privileges has to be added like P7, so this gives them read access to some other repository, Maven repository. Then I can come to the tester role and I can give P7 to them. That means this tester role is updated with the new permission. That means whoever is assuming this tester role, user 3, will also get P7 privilege. In case if I have to remove P2 access for all the testers, I'll simply go to the role and remove this P2. Removing this P2 means not deleting the P3 privilege. It is just removing that particular privilege for the tester role. Okay, I assigned, now I have removed that permission. That means this P2 permissions will be removed for all the users with this tester role. Okay, clear guys? Understood?
Yes.
So user can have multiple roles. That means being an admin, I can have developer, tester, operation, developer, deployer, all roles I can have. Okay. Similarly, a role can have multiple privileges. Okay. Privileges are the individual operations. So I can create a privilege just for read operations. I can create a privilege for read, write, delete access. Okay. A role can have more than one privilege, and a user can have more than one role. Okay. So more than one role will be usually limited to admins, super admins, and all. Okay, but a individual user should have an individual role, but role can have n number of privileges. Okay, I cannot restrict a role to a single privilege. In that case, I have to create hundreds of roles, but it's not like that. Only privileges can be more in number, so roles will be again smaller. Roles like developer, tester, deployer, something like that. Okay, so these are all the privileges. Okay, so there are some standard privileges already given by Nexus. Okay, so here there is this privilege called Nexus users create. So this is a privilege. So if anyone having this privilege can create Nexus users. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll first create a role. I'll create a role called X. Okay, to this role I'll give the privilege called NX users create. Okay, let's assume I'll use one more privilege called NX users delete. That means this role has two different privileges like create and delete of users only. Now what I'll do, I'll take this X role and give it to Y user. Okay, then Y user gets these two permissions like create and delete of users. Now if Y with his credentials, once he logs into the Nexus UI, okay, he can only do two things. One, he can create a user. The other one, he can delete a user. Understood? Clear? And when you're creating, obviously you should see whether it is created or not. So you should also give the read permissions to it. Okay, or else, you know I want to give all the user related privileges like create, delete, read, update. Why to give individual roles? I'll simply use the all. Okay, so this NX users all will give you all the permissions for users. That means you create a user, you delete a user. Okay, clear guys? Okay, even these roles can be created. See here what I'm doing, I'm trying to create a role. The role is known as developer. Okay, a role needs privileges. Okay, so automatically the list of available privileges will be shown on the left hand side. Okay, so this privilege role called NX all, okay, which is like a admin privilege. Okay, so which means you can do anything. So if I want to have all the all the privileges for this developer role, simply select NX all and click on right click. This will come here. This is given. That means, so this NX all will come here. So this developer role, okay, has NX all, which means this role is admin kind of a role. If I take X user and if I give this developer role to him, he is also big. He is also an admin now. Okay, understood? Because I gave him all the permissions to this role. This role is being assigned to some user. So obviously, is a admin. Any questions?
Vikram, is it possible to can we create a custom roles?
Yeah, it's a custom role I'm creating.
Uh,
So the question
okay,
should be
but I
custom
mean,
privilege.
yes, right, correct, correct.
Yeah, it's a custom privilege. Yeah, you can create it. But Nexus is smart enough to give you all this. Let's say I created a Maven proxy. Okay, so
Okay,
automatically
yeah.
Maven proxy kind of privilege will be created, like Maven proxy delete, Maven proxy read, Maven proxy create, Maven proxy all. So all these pre-releases, right, automatically will be created by Nexus, and it will be added to your list of pre-releases. So you don't have to even create those pre-releases. Okay. So every pre-release is already
Uh,
available. Once you create a repository, those pre-releases will be automatically added.
Actually, my question is, for example, I'm working on some particular project, for example, some FTDev. Okay, so I can create it like that FTDev, and I will give the what are the privileges I will add into that particular folder. Is that possible? No.
See, particular folder level is not. Okay. Here, role level and privilege level. Okay. So if I have a Docker folder, okay,
Hmm.
and if I give privilege of only read to this folder to particular user, he can see the folder and he can read the contents. But if I don't give the read access to this folder, he cannot even see that folder in his login once he logs in. Otherwise, he'll see the folder, but all the content inside it will be blank for him. Okay. So here it is not folder level, it is repository level.
Repos.
Okay. So of
Uh,
course, inside the
yeah.
repositories, it will be arranged inside the form of folders. Okay. So here folder, it is like a path. Getting?
Got it. Sorry, one. I mean, for example, we have some bigger organizations. Actually, we have number of projects we are using. So my project purpose, I'm using a. I will give a separate privileges to my project team. Okay.
No,
For
it's not
example, I put in.
project. It's again, I'm
Oh,
saying it's a repository. Okay. So
okay.
let me show you. So there are repositories that we create, right?
Ah,
Maven, Docker. So we only
yeah, yeah, correct.
control the repository level. So your project
Oh,
level is not available. You are not creating a
oh,
project here. It's a repository. Okay.
deposit.
So I'll
Okay,
tell
okay.
you, just give me some time.
Yeah,
Maybe
I got it.
tomorrow
No,
it will be clear. So you won't see any
sure, sure.
folders or projects. It's a repository.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank.
And there is this anonymous role. Okay. This anonymous role, once you assign or enable this anonymous role, without any login credentials, they'll get read privilege for all the repositories. Okay. So usually this anonymous role is created so that without any authentication, people can use your Nexus to pull the Docker images, Maven dependencies, etc. Okay. So this anonymous role, if you ask me whether it is mandatory or not, it is not. But of course, you can open anonymous access to everyone. Okay. And then there is developer role who can upload, and team lead role who can create, upload, and also build machine role here. So for Jenkins also, okay, we need login credentials, right? Yeah, because Jenkins has to connect the Nexus either to pull the artifacts or to push the artifacts. Okay, that means Jenkins should authenticate itself. So when you're creating authentication for Jenkins, I can create a user for Jenkins called Jenkins user. Okay, and then I'll create a password for him. That is fine. But what are privileges I need to give it to him? So first, I need to know what all folders he needs access to, what all repositories. Then I'll only give read permissions to that particular role. Okay, let's say I have 10 different repositories. For all these 10 different repositories, I can give read only permissions to a particular role. Okay, and I can assign that role to the Jenkins user. That's it. Now Jenkins can only access those repositories, that is only through reading. It cannot modify, it cannot upload anything to that. Okay. Of course, if your Jenkins also need to push some artifacts, like it needs to store artifacts in Nexus, you should also create, you should also give it create permissions. Okay. But don't try to give delete permissions to Jenkins, because if someone writes a wrong pipeline, so they'll delete your whole repository contents. Okay. Either you give the read access or create access. So create access is safe, right? Even if I create a wrong, or even if I push a wrong artifacts, so obviously I can delete it later. But if I delete the existing artifacts, right, it's a big problem, correct? That's why never give any tools like Jenkins or any other tools that integrate with your Nexus. So never give the delete permissions or edit permissions. Either you give the read access or which one, create access. Okay, understood guys? So these are the different roles that comes out of box. So one is the admin role. Okay, so this admin role has all the admin level privileges, and there is this Nexus anonymous role, and this Nexus anonymous role has only read access to the repository. Okay, so you can click on any of these roles and you can see all the privileges that are given to these roles. Okay, clear guys? Okay, so this is Nexus admin role, and you can see the privileges. So what privileges it Nexus this Nexus admin has? It's all. That means, so if I assign this Nexus admin role to any user, he gets all the privileges. Okay, so and we also come across this term called realms. Okay, so realms are the way how we authenticate with the tools like Jenkins, Nexus. Okay, so for smaller organizations, right? So Nexus repository will store all the users' information. Okay, your creation, deletion, everything happens in the Nexus repository. But for larger organizations, right, they'll have LDAP, or they'll have a single sign-on. So where they will not maintain their user database in Nexus. Nexus will not have any user-related information. Instead, Nexus will contact the SSO or external LDAP to authenticate you. Okay, so once you enter the credentials, right, it may go to LDAP server, authenticate, and then Nexus will let you in. Okay, or else you can also have single sign-on. Like in many sites, we'll see sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Apple, right? So these are all single sign-ons. Clear, guys?
Yes.
So we'll stop here because setting up will take at least half an hour. So we'll connect again tomorrow morning, same time, and then we'll complete the Nexus installation part. Okay. And we'll also see some of the administration activities that we can perform in Nexus, how to create repositories. So everything related to the installation and basic administration, we are going to see in the next class.
Thank you, Vikram.
Vikram, one
Thank you.
offline question. Okay. For example, without Nexus, is it possible to create a CI/CD pipelines? I mean,
Yes.
is there any
If you
other
don't
way
want to
to?
store, if you don't want to store any artifacts, or if you are relying on public repositories, like if you want to store your Docker images, you can opt for Docker Hub.
Okay. So, as a DevOps engineer, we need to handle the Nexus administration, those things, or some other team
Exactly.
can
You
handle
should.
that.
It depends
Oh,
on your role. Okay, if your role permits only till CI/CD, you don't have to worry about handling Nexus and all. But if you have to do, administration is one and the only activity we do, like creating users, giving them access, configuring public proxy repositories, creating hosted repositories, creating privileges, okay, debugging issues, creating mirroring, replication, yeah, installing, upgrades, migration, all this comes under the administration.
it is a only one-time job, or day-to-day work also will be there in a Nexus.
Day-to-day work, it depends
Day-to-day
again,
work. Depends.
like
Yeah, right.
whenever there is a requirement. Yeah.
Mm. Thanks, Vikram. I have.